Today, I'm going to be talking about some monsters that are one of the leading causes of extinction while costing us more than $26 billion a year and causing harm to us. No, this isn't no crazy Halloween story. These are invasive species. So I'm going to be talking about the dangers of invasive species. So, we've heard this term thrown around out. Probably if you live in Florida or even anywhere in the United States, the term invasive species, you've heard it around news media, conversations, but what exactly is an invasive species? So, according to the Invasive Species Advisory Committee and their 2006 paper titled Invasive Species Definition, Clarification, and Guidance, an invasive species is a non-native species whose introduction does or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human, animal, or plant health. So there's a few terms in there that you might know, you might not know. So a non-native species is just a species that isn't native to a certain area. This can be a species from around the world or even a species from the same country. So if you take like a polar bear from Antarctica and you bring it down to Florida, that's a non-native species. And if it starts competing for the native species food and destroying the environment, then it becomes an invasive species. Another term for non-native species is exotic species. And then native species is just something that's been at an area for historically, it's always been there. So like Florida, we have the bald eagle as well as the burrowing owls and cape and gopher tortoises all around. So a few common species of invasive species that you've probably heard of, especially in Florida, is one of the biggest one is the lionfish. This is a big invasive species that has come and invaded our saltwater ecosystems, especially reef systems and everything in those areas. Another one, snakeheads. This one has kind of gone down in numbers, but it used to be a very big problem, and it's still a problem in the canals around Lake Okeechobee. We also have the green iguanas, which you can see if you go to anywhere in the Cape, you can see them around, or even in Key West or anywhere in the Keys, they're everywhere. And then the boa constrictor, specifically the Burmese python as well. This is a big one that you've probably heard all over the media, especially in the Everglades. And one that I bet everyone knows and has probably had some sort of experience with is the fire ants. That's actually an invasive species. So some interesting species we have in Florida. We have monkeys in Florida, piranhas in Florida, as well as a big one that I have an issue with is the Malayan cichlids. This is actually a picture from a project I did seeing how many were in a specific body of water. And there's a few different types of ways that invasive species come to where they are. So one type is intentional introductions. This is like release of pets, which is how a lot of the pythons, the lionfish, the cichlids came into our waterways. And then another type is unintentional. So this is just something that just randomly happened that made the invasive species where they are today. And like this is a reason for a lot of our monkey populations, especially over in the Miami area. When a Hurricane Andrew came through, it destroyed some research facilities and set a bunch of the monkeys free, and now they reproduce and have a stable little community over in Miami. Invasive species, they're fun, they're cool, you know, you got piranhas, you got all these weird wild animals in your own backyard, but they're actually really bad for it. They affect the environment greatly. They compete for natural species, their food, their space, their territory. The National Wildlife Federation declares that approximately 42% of threatened or endangered species are at risk due to invasive species on their website about endangered species. They also cause harm to humans. So a big one is the lionfish. They're poisonous. They have a bunch of venomous spines, dorsal spines, pelvic spines, which if you get spiked by them can actually lead to death. And of course, there's the fire ants, which many of us have probably been bit by. And also the monkeys, they might not intentionally attack you, but they do carry diseases, which the monkeys actually carry herpes B, which can be passed through their saliva to humans. Some economic impacts. We spend a lot of money in the United States to try to fight invasive species. A 2021 study by Crystal Ornelia et al. Revealed that invasive species has cost North America $2 billion per year in the early 1960s to over $26 billion a year since 2010. So what can we do to help reduce the impacts of invasive species? The first thing we can do is take action. For the pythons, we have a big yearly python bowl, as they call it, where they actually let you go out into the Everglades and kill pythons, and whoever gets the biggest python or the most amount of pythons wins a certain amount of prize money. They do this for lionfish as well, where you can go out and whoever gets the most lionfish wins money. Or you can just, if you're fishing and you catch invasive species such as cichlids or lionfish, keep them and try to make food out of them. If it's lionfish, be careful because they are venomous. But, or like iguanas, you can eat those as well. People have. And another big thing is practice sustainable pet practices. So if you have any snakes or any type of species that you keep with you, don't let them out if they get too big, or if you just don't want them anymore, don't release them. You have to keep them until they eventually pass away, so that way you aren't introducing new species into the environment that should not be there. And then the last thing is to become more informed. This is important because it's what we're doing right now. We're learning about invasive species. And so the more that we know about invasive species, the less likely that more invasive species will be released into the wild. And also it gives the wider community more of an understanding of invasive species and what they do to our native ecosystems. So I hope that we've all learned a thing or two and maybe become better and more environmentally conscious about our invasive species and our impact on our environment.